Hey, what's happening? It's me, Robert Phoenix. Looks like I got a little bit of green on here, which is why it gets all pixelated, fractalized. I think behind me I have a depiction of the morning sky in Nevada. Looks pretty cool, doesn't it? What's going on, everybody? It's me, Robert Phoenix, and this is the Astro Weather. We got a really active chat today, and it's great to have everybody here. Jay is here, and she had a very interesting spelling for Chattaria. She spelled it Chattaria, like Teria, like a cafeteria. And that's kind of cool, right? Like a chatteria. I like that. I like that. So like a chatting cafeteria, not to be confused with Santeria, which is something very different. Anyway, are you guys following this Taylor Swift thing? It's not the Taylor that we've gone into a whole other level of Taylor Swift now. For a while, it was she was ubiquitous. She's everywhere. She's on every stinking magazine cover, right? There seems to be an all-out effort for America to absolutely be swallowed by the Taylor Swift Death Star, right? That's what it feels like. And now there's been this interesting pushback on the so-called right, where conservatives are basically telling MAGA people to leave her alone. She's a wholesome girl. It's a nice relationship. Let the kids just love each other and have PDAs in front of everybody. So now this thing is kind of flipped. And I'm not going to talk about it much more here today. We'll get into it tomorrow in greater detail in 15 Minutes of Flame. I have a different topic saved for today's show. Anyway, it's Terry Catterley's birthday today. And we're going to play a little birthday song for Terry, but not right now. What we are going to talk about is the weather. There's something about the weather. It's the last day of January. Stretching out into February, which is a very short month. And before you know it, we'll be in March. And guess what? It'll be springtime. Ain't that something? So we are on a rocket ride already, chronologically. Here we go. We have the moon in Libra. This is where I was talking about the conjunction with the South Node. And man, I was, it's always a trip doing this, I have to say, because sometimes I will say stuff about what's going on with the weather, right? And it'll apply to my life. So just to let you know, I'm not immune to whatever it is I talk about. And I knew yesterday when I saw this moon square with Venus that I was going to have to deal with the maternal issue in this household last night. And that was the absolute truth. It happened later in the day, but I had to deal with it. And I talked about that yesterday. I talked about the moon is the mother squaring Venus, and Venus in Capricorn here. And Venus moon squares they're odd, like they're odd squares, because what we're trying to do is reconcile our emotional input with our contractual agreements. And of course, Venus in Capricorn tends to be very distant and detached, very businesslike. Relationships thaw over time under Venus in Capricorn. And behind a cold exterior lies a warmer heart. Again, that's over time. So we have that, and it's just this odd, and we have it today, early here in this part of the world. For other people in a different time zone, it's again going to be just part of what's happening in your world right now. And so here, at the start of our day, we're dealing with this aspect. And as the moon moves through the various degrees here up until 20, which we'll get into sometime much later tonight, early tomorrow morning, the moon square to Venus is still in effect. And then there's that conjunction with the South Node. So we're still dealing, the moon in Libra wants to be fair, right? So what we wind up doing here is kind of digging out what could be considered unfair conditions, right? So there's a real kind of constant application here, which started yesterday, of trying to balance one's emotional input versus the agreements that we have, and especially with people that we have a maternal relationship with, because that is the moon, right? And then it's a very precarious T-square here, because on the other side, of course, is Chiron. And that makes the general mood today on an emotional level one that, of course, is seeking balance, but on the other hand, is susceptible to wounds and slights coming from others who don't understand sort of the nature of what's going on. I mean, the one thing is, so again, I'm not here to single out Capricorn as a bad sign. I like Capricorn. I got Saturn in Capricorn. My progressed ascendant is in Capricorn. My progressed Venus is in Capricorn. My progressed Jupiter is in Capricorn. My progressed Saturn is in Capricorn, right? I don't have a beef with Capricorn at all. But as an astrologer, right, Capricorn is, again, one of those signs that is trying to get on top, right? It wants to kind of get over. The whole idea is to elevate, right? That's Capricorn's goal, is to elevate and to get to the next level. And so when we see this, right, with Venus here and then Chiron coming in, we can feel the effects of relationships and agreements with people in our lives that they're not warm and fuzzy. They're not Cancerian, right? They're not, oh, here, let me put my arm around you and tell you how much I love you, or tell you how much I care about this, or it doesn't roll that way. Now, the one thing that is good that can come out of this, now remember, Venus is coming in right here, and it's going to be squaring Chiron. So this is not necessarily a condition that resolves itself like the moon. The moon moves on in 24 hours, and we're having a different discussion, and it's in Scorpio, right? But this is ongoing for like the next 9 days with this square with Chiron, and then it separates. So this is an ongoing pattern here, right? This is where people place some degree of either hierarchy or some degree of formality. I'll use the word formality, and this upon everyday relationships. And the square with Chiron, it can be, I think it can be good if people are willing to kind of break it down a little bit. I think it could be good. I mean, again, when we get into Venus and Capricorn, Capricorn's all about aging. It's all about, Chronos and time. And with the square with Chiron, like, it's very challenging. And if you're on the wrong side of the watch with time and your time on this planet, and how you're living your life and your relationships in your life, this Chiron square can be, very humbling in a lot of ways. And what happens for a lot of, look, I'm going to just put all the chips on the table here when it comes to people that watch this stream, whether you're in chat or whether you're watching it later. My experience, both personally and virtually, with people that are here is that you're conscious people. And if you're not conscious all the time, you're working on it, right? That is my take. And a lot of times there's a price to pay for that. Because what happens is that we live in a world where people aren't always conscious. And it falls upon us in a lot of ways to like do double time. So when we get into this Chiron square with Venus, and we're dealing with people who are out of touch with their emotions and out of touch with their contracts and their agreements, and especially ones that they feel lock them in to a more oppressive relationship with the body and time. Like that's a ticking time bomb right here with this Chiron Venus square. So for people that are in this zone and they are dealing with others, and the others tend to be acting out of fear, and that's a real highlight here at the beginning of the day, but it's not going to go away. I mean, with this Venus Chiron square. So we have to adjust, we have to adapt. And I also think that we have to find boundaries and limits, because I think the reflex with Chiron, and again, I'm just speaking for myself, and maybe I'm speaking for you, but I kind of move back and forth between kind of empathizing with other people and doing my best to understand how they're feeling, but at the same time, not being held hostage by that, and being able to articulate in real time why things work, why they don't work, and to not be as emotionally attached to the outcome of some of those conversations. And I feel like this Chiron square with Venus has a lot to do with that, right? You can either take on somebody else's pain, which is what a lot of, I think, highly sensitive people or HSPs do, or people that are empathic or people that are healers, what they do. Or you can understand another person's experience, but then move through that and find a way to create some boundaries without being steamrolled or without taking everything on. And I think that's a challenge that a lot of people in this quote unquote community have, because a lot of you are, have some kind of healing capacity inside of you. And one of the things that I would say as we move through this square is to try not to fix everything, right? Because that would be one of the other reflexes of a Chiron Venus square. Like you'll run in and try to do triage. And Aries is a sign for me that is connected to triage and emergency. You don't have to do that, right? What you have to do, and this is where the moon comes into play, just this morning, right, moving into the latter part of the day, is you have to find balance between being able to take care of a situation and realizing that whatever the other person is going through is connected to you, but it is not you. It's not you. So this is where we get tested in our relationships. And this is going to be happening over the next week. And I think it's a very interesting time. Now we could talk more about the moon as it comes in and starts to square Mars and Mercury again today, later tonight. And I believe at some point tomorrow, it moves into Scorpio. So we get into conflict here. There's a lot of conflict in the air. And the moon in Libra is just trying to do its best to balance the conflict and to make it all kind of work out or round up to the next number. And the Mars moon square can be very inflammatory. And again, we're dealing with Capricornian energies, which at times are ruthless. I'm just, being upfront. They can be ruthless. And I guess maybe the upside to this is that if you feel stuck or lethargic, this Mars Moon square can get your ass going, right? But then what happens is that if you overact, overreact, perhaps even overshare, there's that square with Chiron, and now we're into judgment. But that's a big thing with Chiron, is judgment. So this is some very interesting territory, transpersonal territory that we're working on and working through. How do we deal with anger? How do we deal with articulating things that make us feel angry or frustrated? How do we deal with other people who are coming at us with their anger and frustration? And again, for a lot of us, the whole idea is to fix it, to heal it, to make it better. For some of you who've been kind of ground down and desensitized since 2020, there's a lot of fuck you in this too. It's like, fuck you, you take care of it yourself. You take care of this yourself. Don't put it on me. There's some strength to that. What's the adage to make an omelet? You got to break a few eggs. There's some of that in this T-square here. So one of the things that I'm going to put out, and not that you have to follow the script verbatim, but just in case you fuck up, in your mind, just in case you fuck up, I'm going to say that the fuck up is okay. Because there's so much going on here with this T-square over the next 24 hours. And even, again, when the moon moves out of Libra, we're still dealing with a lot of these squares with Chiron. So if you think you fuck up or you fucked up, the first thing you should probably do is figure out if that's true or not. And then if it's true, to what degree is it true? Is it 100% true? Is it 50% true? Is it a 10% fuck up and it was something that you did and you could have done it a little bit better? Like you may have made the right decision, but your approach to it or how you articulated it was awkward, right? So I feel like a lot of this has to do with forgiveness. Like this is because I think if you make a mistake or an error in your mind, and remember, Venus is coming in and we got that Chiron square there, Chiron square there, Chiron square there. It's mostly Venus and Mars. Mercury's starting to separate a little bit, but man, you could get really hung up on a cross with this square alone. And now we've got this cardinal T square. And the good news about a cardinal T square is that it can catalyze you, the individual, into kind of looking at your role in this. And then again, if you think you've dropped the ball, then it's okay, right? It's okay. Just recognize it, dust yourself off and get back up. Vow to do better and don't beat yourself up. I do feel like in some ways, Chiron in Aries is sort of self-flagellating. It's kind of medieval, I think. And we're really kind of in this zone right now, right? So this is the prickly part of the Astro Weather. And it's kind of going on Mars is starting to separate a little bit, but it's still in the mix here. Now, conversely, and this is where, again, I talked about this yesterday, and that is the trine with Mars and Uranus, Mercury, Uranus, and now Venus is coming in. And this is where we're in the pivot, right? So you can pivot off of your missteps or miscues or things that you think were errors or even things that other people have attributed to you that are not yours. You can pivot quickly. Pivot quickly. And I'll give you a clue here. We're going to take a page out of Tony Robbins' playbook. I'm not a big Tony Robbins guy, but one thing that he talks about, and almost any other quote unquote healer, mind body person talks about that I do agree with, is a state change. right? It's a state change that you somehow have to change your physical state of being in order to move through things. And when we get into Taurus, we are into physicality, we are into our body. When we get into Capricorn, Capricorn is an earth sign. So in Mars and Capricorn, we're engaging with our physical bodies in a way that is active, right? It's like, expression and manifestation through work, success, and achievement. That's how Capricorn rolls. So if you go through an experience, the fastest way to get off of your own cross is a state change and do something physical. Go for a walk, leave your cell phone at home, right? Just get out of your mind. Don't just get out of your mind, get into your body, work up a sweat, get your heart rate up. If you're walking, swing your arms, right? It's okay if you look like a crazy person going down the street, or if you have some other form of exercise, you want to make it fairly vigorous because you want to change your state. That's the goal here. And I think intentionality is really important. If your intention is to change your state so that you're not getting bogged down with a lot of this dross and some of the judgment that comes along with whatever kind of transpersonal or transactional experience you have with another person, this is how you do it. And you can move off of it quickly. And I guarantee you do that and you will have a different understanding and a different perception about what's taken place, your role in it, and the role of others. You will have a very different perception and understanding about it because whatever you're experiencing won't be locked in. Okay, it will not be locked in. So this is a really interesting time, right? We talked about this yesterday. We have the sun in Aquarius. We have Uranus, which rules Aquarius. And here we go. Speaking of which, the sun is coming into this T-square even more hot. In 15 minutes, we're gonna get into the kind of the I call it it's the war between the ages in Europe, and that's what we're witnessing with what's going on with the farmers in Germany and France and even Italy, and it's really kind of the long arm or the long reach of post-Middle Ages Europe and land ownership and agriculture, sort of this post-historical dissolution of feudalism, right? This is what we're talking about here. And these people are the guardians of that in Europe. In the United States, a little bit different, right? Because we had a war to secure our property rights, theoretically. In Europe, it's different. And they're going up against the World Economic Forum and something very futuristic, something very 21st century. And it's almost as if an alien force has landed in Europe. And these people who are literally disarmed and only have their tractors are taking on this alien force. So to me, it's a fascinating, depiction of culture and time. It's a culture and time clash. Anyway, that's the sun square with Uranus. And I'm just talking about it because we're gonna hear more of this. Right now, Macron is talking about bringing troops to deal with the guys with the tractors. This is where we're headed, right? So that's just on the collective level. And of course, Aquarius is a very collective sign. But in your own life, right, it's about disrupting patterns. And when you look at this T-square, what is it doing? Ultimately, it's disrupting patterns. Either disrupting patterns with how you relate to people, or how they relate to you, and where people are trying to, flush their frustration or flush their aggression or dump on you, and what you do with it. Or in some cases, maybe you're that person and you're overwhelmed. We live in, look, I'm going to say this. We live in a society now where everything, if you take everything into account, it is not a healthy world. It is not, and we're very sturdy and rugged creatures, so we can adapt. I mean, that's part of our story, right? We can adapt. But if you just sit back and look at all the inputs that are coming in, it is not healthy. And frankly, it's overwhelming, right? This whole social media thing. Now, Gen Z may be able to handle it because they kind of grew up with the internet and computers in a way that no other generation has. They can be very facile with it. But for everybody else, like, it's so artificial and so synthetic. And we've learned to integrate it into our lives. But at the same time, I don't think we're aware. And that's just like I don't think we're aware of how it affects us. And that's just kind of one part of the story. I mean, and I could sit here for the next 20 minutes and go granular and just break everything down, from the water, from the food, from the air, from the various media inputs, right, to the social engineering of people and how they react to us. I mean, we live in a world now where if you add all of those things up, it is completely overwhelming. And I don't know how any society can sustain itself under the weight of that kind of constant pressure and overstimulation. I just don't. And again, maybe some of the Gen Z kids can surf the wave, but there are a lot of people who can't, and we're seeing it, right? We're seeing it in the encampments of the homeless. We're seeing it when people are just saying, "Fuck, I've had enough of Taylor fucking Swift," and then you have this whole other contingent. Taylor Swift is just the tip of the iceberg. There is a bunch beneath Taylor Swift. And that's what a lot of these conservative pundits don't understand. They're just taking Taylor Swift as some kind of isolated, romance with Travis Kelce that we should all be happy about because two people have found love. And who cares if she's a Biden Democrat, or who cares if she, favors abortion, or who cares if she like, all that stuff should just be irrelevant, right? But Taylor Swift is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole other reality beneath that surface that leads into that. So this is the Sun square Uranus. And does this mean that we're at a breaking point? I mean, these are fixed signs here. And the closer the Sun gets into that square with Uranus, what is that going to be? 7 days from now? Oh, I can see people losing their shit. I can see people losing their shit, like just too much. Just try to step back and try to take it all in for a moment. Wrap your head around E. Jean fucking Carroll. Just wrap your head around that for a moment. Like, we're supposed to be able to digest all of this, all these inputs, and somehow lead a sane, healthy, and balanced life. Good luck. Good luck. So what does this mean? Well, it could mean people step away for a little bit. I'm not going to follow. I'm not going to watch the Super Bowl. I'm going to shut the news down for a while. I'm going to try to get out in nature and not notice that, the skies look like a freaking spider web, right? So this is what's going on here. And I feel like we're kind of reaching this critical mass moment. And it's not that far in advance. Remember, this is the first ingress of the Sun in Aquarius, post a Pluto ingress into Aquarius. We didn't have that last year. So we're in brand new territory here. And I just feel like we're going to see people lose their shit because we could adapt and we can modify, but we were not meant to live in this version of the world for a sustained period of time. It is unsustainable. It is completely unsustainable. So again, let's get back here, right, with these squares. And you have to figure out what's your relationship. Venus is also your relationship to things. You have, so you have to figure out what your relationship is with all of this. And here's the poor little moon in Libra, just trying to find balance with everything. All right. I always like a good, so again, you can make pivots. Just remember this. You can change your state quickly. You can do that. I also really like the sextiles with Mars and Mercury, and Venus is coming in, and it will sextile Neptune, and these are creative. So look for creative options as well. The creative options and creativity and artistry are healing. And one of the reasons why, again, I think we're in the state that we're in is because a lot of people, I wouldn't say have given up on creativity and artistry. I think that that's just part of the human spirit. But maybe they've neglected it to a certain point. So I would urge, again, finding a creative approach to dealing with your everyday issues or finding an artistic approach. And sometimes it's just that you are artistic, you are creative, you have latent skills. The sextile says, go ahead, try it out, work on them. It's an opportunity. And there is solidity with the Venus sextile to Saturn. So there are relationships that you can bank on and that you can count on. And what's interesting is that I think there's an opportunity here where potentially new relationships emerge. And all of a sudden, somebody is more rock solid than you thought they were or had the capacity to be. And I think that's really interesting. All right. There's your Astro Weather. I got a little preachy there. I'm not going to apologize, but it is what it is. Sometimes I just can't. Sometimes I can't control myself. Okay. Here we go. It's a little banner action from my guy Chris over at True Hemp Science. And True Hemp Science, your one-stop shop. Your one-stop shop for all things CBD. And all you got to do, see that little graphic down there? You type in 15 minutes for free goodies when you spend $100 or more. And that's all you got to do. You get a free goodie bag. $150 or more gets you free shipping. And guess what? You always get a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you're interested in the medicinal properties of some of the finest organically sourced hemp, that's your guy. That's your place. And he's always creating new blends. He's got some new products on the site. You can always call him up. You have to make an appointment. And then you can ask about it. And he'll give you the lowdown. He'll give you the skinny. Okay. Today's True Hemp Science star of the day. Man, I could have gone with Norman Mailer. But instead, I'm going with Derek Jarman. And some of you may ask, who the fuck is Derek Jarman? I've never heard of Derek Jarman. Derek Jarman was a filmmaker who lived in London, and he started to begin to make art in independent movies during the 70s, and I believe up into the 80s. I think he died of AIDS sometime during the 1980s. And one of Derek Jarman's most notable films is a film called Jubilee. which is a very unusual kind of time travel movie that includes a number of punk rockers. And I think it has Adam Ant, Toya Wilcox, Vivienne Westwood, who was the grande dame of all things punk rock, fashion wise. I think she did the fashion and costumes. It's probably his most well known movie. He kind of discovered Tilda Swinton. Tilda Swinton was in a number of Derek Jarman movies. That wasn't the only movie he did. It was one he was most well known for. And so he was very eccentric. Of course, he's an Aquarian. He's very eccentric. And he's got this intercepted house. He's got Capricorn on the ascendant. And then his second house resolves itself in Pisces. And Derek was a very bright guy. And so, okay. Now I'm going to get into a little inside baseball with Derek Jarman, which is why I'm doing his chart today versus Norman Mailer, who I think is an interesting chart. So I've told this story before, which has to do with this photographer that I had met in California, who was English, who had some wild stories. I like this guy. I think his name was Nick. And he told me some stories about Derek Jarman. And he had actually been to Derek Jarman's flat in London. And he said it was one of the most unusual situations in that, and this is where we get into Saturn and Uranus in the fourth house. I'm going somewhere with this. If you wanted to use the bathroom in Derek Jarman's flat, and I'm not lying here, this is based on what he told me, is that the facilities, or the loo as it's known in England, were in the middle of the flat. And there was nothing that separated, and it's slightly elevated too. It wasn't like it was at floor level. It was slightly elevated. So if you had to use the loo for whatever reason, whether it was liquid or solid, you literally had to do it in front of whoever was in the flat. I kid you not. This is the story. And when I see that with Saturn and Uranus here in the fourth house, and especially in Taurus, right? So we get into Taurus, we're really into the physical body, right? And there it is, like, oh, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Well, that story makes sense now, right? It's like Uranus is kind of kooky and different. And then there's Saturn here. It's like, sure, you want to use the bathroom? No problem. There it is, right? Now, I would say, based on his chart, that Derek Jarman had some appetites, and that those appetites ultimately were unhealthy for him. Like he dies of AIDS, right? So there's something about his life. So we have Mars in Taurus, and it's fixed, right? So we have this Mars square to the Sun, Mars square to Venus, squaring everything over here, right? In Aquarius. So he's rebellious. Derek Jarman's rebellious. Of course he is. He's making a movie with punk rockers and Queen Elizabeth, right? Jubilee. And then over here we have another square, Mars square Chiron, Mars square Pluto, Mars square the Moon. So he's driven, I think, by his appetites, which are, Taurus's appetites. It's appetites for the physical act and the physical body. He's got Mars in the third house, which is incredibly restless and driven in a lot of ways. And you could kind of see the path for destruction here in his chart. We've got, let's see, what is that? Mars Chiron square. Yep. Mars Pluto square. You can just see it, right? It's all self-destructive. It's a self-destructive chart. And he doesn't, he dies fairly young. In the meantime, he has Neptune, highest planet in the chart, reaching apex, which has a lot to do with cinema and film. True node in Virgo, did he live a healthy life? Did he live a a more pious life. It's funny because he somehow came away with the nickname Saint Derek, right? And even this picture of the corona around him sort of typifies that. And you get that with the South Node in Pisces and the True Node in Virgo, right? There's a lot of religious iconography, but it seems to me, and this is not a value judgment, by the way, but it seems to me that the South Node in Pisces is kind of where Derek Jarman lived. He kind of lived in this realm of very fluid boundaries in a lot of ways, right? I mean, I think this is, again, had he lived more from the Virgoan perspective, and maybe he did in his own way, who knows? Maybe he'd still be around, but not with his T-square. I don't think so. It's not like that there's an appetite for destruction here, but there's kind of an appetite for destruction. This T-square with Mars and Taurus, which is fixed, is kind of a wrecking ball. And it's going to affect his relationships, and it's going to affect him personally. He's got a Scorpio midheaven, and then there's Juno. And one of the things that Jarman was credited with was his ability to create something new, like a whole new style of cinema. So, give him props for that. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention my David Bowie story with Derek Jarman. And I looked at Bowie's chart. He's kind of all over Jarman's first house, from Bowie's sun to Bowie's rising sign of Aquarius. They were kind of interconnected. And without getting into the weeds too much with the story, they were working on a movie together, and it was called Neutron. And David Bowie left his cigarettes at Derek Jarman's house. Now, Saturn is, right, the ruler of Capricorn. Of course, David Bowie's a Capricorn. It's kind of interesting. And Derek Jarman, Jupiter and Gemini, a little gossipy there, told his friends that Bowie had left his cigarettes, Marlboro Lights always, at his place. And when David Bowie heard about it, word came back to him. He told Derek Jarman, Derek, I'm no longer doing that movie with you, and I want my cigarettes back. Now, I know this to be a true story because when I interviewed David Bowie, I asked him about this. And I asked him about the movie Neutron. And I said, Dave, there's another movie I want to ask you about. It's has to do with Derek Jarman and Neutron. Whatever happened to that? And you should have seen him. He was like, oh, right. Now, that was such a fantastic idea. We had all these great storyboards, and it was about this futuristic, fascistic society, and it was great idea. We just we ran out of money, and there wasn't enough money behind it. I'm like, oh, and he looked at me and said, by the way, how do you know that story? Not many people know that story. Not many people know about it. So I'm like, oh, well, David, another part of the story I want to ask you about. Rumor has it you left your Marlboro Lights there, and Derek Jarman kept telling his friends about it, and you heard about it, and you told him you wanted your Marlboros back, and you weren't going to do the movie with him. You should have seen the look on his face. He fucking white as a ghost. I mean, he was already pretty pale. He got even paler. Anyway, Derek Jarman, interesting. He's not everybody's cup of tea, right? He is going to indulge in homoeroticism. He's going to indulge in some degree of challenging cultural norms and standards, right? This is what he's about. His films are interesting because they're not perfect, right? He's got some interesting themes. He has some interesting actors that he's put around him. Very Aquarian in that regard. But at the end of the day, his light was snuffed out quite early. And I think astrologically, this is what we're dealing with, and this is what we're looking at. So there's your star of the day, your True Hemp Science star of the day, Derek Jarman. All right. There's something else. Oh, yeah, we got to find a birthday song for Terry. Let's get a birthday song for Terry. Oops. I'm not here. Where are we? You're not supposed to be hearing that. Let's do this. Banners. I don't know why that happened. Oh, that's me. All right. Hold on. Hold on. I think I solved it. There we go. What? I solved it. All right. Let's do a birthday song for Terry. Let's see. All right. What do we got? There's a plethora, an absolute plethora of birthday songs. Let's see. What do we have here? What do we got? Terry is an Aquarian. So it'd be nice if we had some kind of an Aquarian version of Happy Birthday. It's a bit long. Terry, if you're on 15 minutes, I'll play the long version. But instead, I'm going to play a short version. And it is Happy Birthday Dancing Chimp Style. Because honestly, who doesn't like a fucking dancing chimp? We all like dancing chimps. Let's just be honest about it. Here we go. Terry Cataldy, I hope you have a great solar return. And away we go. All right. Thanks. Come join me over on 15 minutes. Link in the show notes. And I'll be back tomorrow for some more Astro Weather. Bye for now.